Emancipation Proclamation of 1863 did not set any slaves free.
But some adults have difficulty handling that.
Via the Emancipation Proclamation, and I challenge you to go look in a law dictionary and look up the definition of emancipation and proclamation, and you will see that a proclamation is not a law.
But some adults have difficulty handling that.
A proclamation is a public announcement by elected officials. It is not a law.
Other information couldn't be expended to you because actually the Emancipation Proclamation dealt with corporations or the transfer of the slaves from the corporate families to the corporate state. It didn't free you. Don't misunderstand that. It means a transfer. And so our people think that the Emancipation Proclamation was a document of freedom, and there was a document of transfer of responsibility for the cares of the property. No different than if we all get together, you know, because we got the burden of doing business as individual units, and we decide to incorporate, and then we have a corporation that takes care of those affairs. Well, that's what the corporate states have done for the plantations. Are we clear on that?
And everybody knows that, but that kind of spoils the game that they've been playing on our people. You see the point? When they incorporated, turned the republic into a corporation.
The other thing that they like to talk about is the idea that the United States is a corporation, right?
Yes. Well, it is. That's true. The United States is a corporation.
Right.
And if you roll all of that back, you'll see exactly the connection between United States being a corporation and the Federal Reserve not being federal at all and being a private organization. And sure, you can pull back all of that, you know, and see how corrupt our government is. Yes, right. That's true. So
You see the point? When they incorporated, turned the republic into a corporation in order to put the Moors later, as they did earlier, solidify the 14th Amendment artificial person in the state of Delaware as Christian property. This is why such persons is called Negroes, Black, and Coloreds, and what do they call themselves this week, can't vote with them names that don't belong to them, except that the overseer, or what you call the CEO, through the Senate, agrees that their cattle can vote as 3/5 persons because they have no name and nationality. When you understand the history from a law perspective, your view will change from it just being some historical flaw or some little dirty trick that the Europeans do. You would need to understand its political ramifications. Because you transact business in another man's name, don't talk about estates and don't talk about property because you don't even own your own body.
Then recognize the reason why they're not, because they're not citizens, they're property. They're property of the citizens. Whoever's name they bear, that's bonded. They're under liens and bonds from birth.
And this is what makes it dangerous for our people to get this information and not be given law. Because their arguments will be based in emotion, totally correct emotionally, totally correct symptomatic, but in law, legally dead.
Let us say this. If you ask the average child in elementary school today, and particularly even a few generations back, how did your family become known as Smith? They will tell you either, oh, that's my grandma's name, or my grandma's side, or my grandpa's name. And you ask them, well, where'd they get it from? Oh, they got that from the slave master, which means they're not ignorant, which means they knew the truth. They did nothing to correct it, did they? That's a contract. It's called acquiescence. So it automatically gives their corporate state jurisdiction, which the modern word used for the slave is called ward, W-A-R-D, ward of the state. And state, not the land, state the corporation. Then you have boards of governors that govern all the states in the commonwealths. Their responsibility is to protect the stock S-T-O-C-K, of the citizens. Negroes, blacks, and coloreds are stocks, starting with the birth certificate and any other contract you make with them.
But some adults have difficulty handling that. Of course, it doesn't seem that way on the surface, does it? You understand what I'm saying to you? Going around claiming to be Smith, Jones, and Johnson, and one Smith, Jones, and Johnson, you can't transact business as Smith, Jones, and Johnson because you're acting as Smith, Jones, and Johnson's agent. And so he got you on stock market as an agent. So when you sign that name, you're simply signing as an agent. Ain't your stuff. The point, you can't transact business in another man's name and then claim any allodial property or right of title. That's why they always get certificates of titles. And they don't even know the certificate of what title is because they don't study law. See the problem?
And they own you because you've been transacting business in their names, and you know it. Even your babies knew it, and you thought it wasn't important. Well, it is. Because when you did that, you gave up your birthright willingly. That's a contract. You just made a pact with them. And it's enforceable all over the world. So Negroes, blacks, and colored people, which are its, they're not human beings, have no rights before any human being on the planet. Not because they don't like you, because you agreed to that by claiming to be something that you are not. What you need to know that it had legal and lawful implications, and this is what they didn't tell you. They just told you it was opinion, you know, people feel about you and all that kind of crap, and you believed them and gave up your birthright. That's what the so-called Negro problem actually is, from a legal and jurisprudence point of view. And what they did, they created Negro, black, and colored, a set of Christian black codes from the church that set up a system in governance that dealt with the movement of these living beings, which is called chattel property, in a bureaucratic manner under wardship status, wards of the state, as stock being held by the European families with these Asiatics who bear their name, which indicates them as property. And all certifications, certificates, etc., relative to those matters, or liens are filed against it by the Europeans, and therefore they can smile on your face and you never know they own you. And then when you get bad treatment, they give you an argument, and that argument is called racism, prejudice, and stuff, and you arguing that, and they really stole your birthright. And so if the people are not aware of that, they don't suspect what that license is for. That license is a movement passport. So they can make sure that you couldn't buy your way out of slavery.
Then they were able to issue statutes, codes, ordinances, resolutions on them. And a statute is not a law. It is corporate policy. If the state comes in and says, you're not treating your children right and we want to take them, right? The first thing you have to say is, state, do I have a contract that says I gave my children to you? Did I, at what point, produce the contract? Produce the contract. If you send me a bill, and understand that if you belong to the corporate board state, you can't make these arguments because you do have a contract, which is the birth certificate, which is the marriage license.
You know, and so all these things which the Europeans have been using to take advantage of our people because they don't study and it doesn't fit their beliefs. Here we go.
A sitting judge whose job is to apply law to fact. Joining me now is the little boy's mother, Jaleesa Martin. All right, so let's begin at the beginning here, Jaleesa. How did you wind up in court? How did this come to this point?
I actually went to court for child support.
Okay.
And me and the father, we couldn't agree on Messiah's last name.
Okay, so you were battling over the surname because you two have different names, obviously. And the judge decided...
Yes, we do.
So the judge is trying to help you through this. And how did the name become the issue instead of the support payments?
She just plainly came out and said, I'm going to change his first name because she didn't like it.
So you're there for support money, fighting over money with the baby's father. The name was kind of extra, whether or not you named the kid on time. There's no set period for when you had to do it. And then this comes out. What did you think when the judge said, by the way, I don't like the name?
I was shocked. I couldn't believe it.
So she sends you away with the father to come up with a different name. You can't, right? You then come back And then a little unknown part of this story is you didn't pick Martin. The father didn't pick Martin. The judge picked Martin, right? Tell me about it.
Yes. She gave us a recess and told us she was going to give us an hour to pick another name for Messiah. And if we didn't, she was going to give him the name that she wanted him to have, which was Martin.
So she named the kid Martin Deshaun McCullough, right?
Yes.
McCullough being your the father's last name. Now, what was your reaction to this? And what was the father's reaction when the judge determined the name?
We was both really shocked, and she really wouldn't let us even say what we had to say. So there was really nothing we could do at that point.
The word Messiah is a title, and it's a title that has only been earned by one person, and that one person is Jesus Christ.
And this is where, under the Christian Black codes, where they set up where the marriage license is registered in the Department of Commerce, then registered in the Department of Orphans, and this is where your children, even before they're born, become wards of the state, which is a legal term for nice slave. And see, nobody's offended because they know that most of our people don't read law, and so they just hear the word and it's interesting, you know. And then the scholars ain't going to tell them because they playing this black game. Do you understand? When they know these people aren't black. Negroes, blacks, and coloreds are stocks, starting with the birth certificate and any other contract you make with them.
And you must understand that. And the reason I'm telling you these things, and the reason we're doing this particular lecture, is because if that's not addressed by the people on a serious matter, it will be used, as it has been used, to profile you, to extract revenues from you as chattel property. And most people are under the impression that slavery in the Union State Society had ended.
Because you transact business in another man's name, don't talk about estates and don't talk about property because you don't even own your own body.
They literally run small municipalities merely on profile stops of Asiatics and of African birth who think they're black. And Asiatics of African birth who think they're Puerto Ricans and Latinos. And so the slavery is maintained through paperwork, and so since you don't see a face now, they can smile at you. And you actually start thinking that you've done something wrong, and actually they're regulating you just like any commercial product. So they don't have to get angry at you, do you? They don't have to, not speak to you in the morning. You can say, top of the morning to you.
Do you understand it? Then you understand why they incorporated you as a being. And it doesn't make corporation itself bad. It means understand what corporation is and understand when someone creates a corporation and tries to pull you into that jurisdiction, whether or not you belong there or if you agreed to it, i.e. whether you challenge that jurisdiction that they created.
See, it was in, say, up into the late 1800s, most of the people that were held to forced servitude, the different plantations or corporations had the logistical problem of, say, delivering to you certain amount of goods for certain services that your company might render our company. And of course, our workers or our slaves or servants were beneficiaries that, because like cattle, they had to be cared for. And they couldn't let you go because you might run away. That's another reason why the license was thrown up too. And that agreement with the several states. And so if the people are not aware of that, they don't suspect what that license is for. That license is a movement passport. So they can make sure that you couldn't buy your way out of slavery.
So we have this kind of problem with our people not knowing who they are. And it's fine on one level from an intellectual perspective. Problem is that they're not aware of the legal ramifications.
Because until we start dealing with some reality, as you were saying the past week, we'll be spinning wheels. Now, when you want to deal with facts, let's deal with the facts. Because that's what most of our people are missing, facts, whether culturally, by law, or historical. And we already know in the areas they've been tampered with. However, if you keep digging, you start getting down to the aggregate.